This happened a few hours ago, and upon waking up and thinking about it, I realized that I most likely just scared the crap out of some poor old man. To start though, you have to understand the situation I recently found myself in. My beloved cat, we'll call him Billy, went missing about 2 weeks ago. I plastered my neighborhood in posters, begging for anyone who sees him to contact me. Today, after weeks of silence, I got a call from a woman claiming to have spotted Billy by the graveyard behind my house. So, naturally, I got dressed and headed out to search for him. But again, some background information is needed. This weekend I came down with an awful cold. I've been sick for days, and my nose has gotten so dry, sometimes it just pours blood. My hair is matted, and my voice currently sounds like a transgendered Shirley Temple. My fever has me constantly drenched in sweat, so overall, I'm a mess. After walking the perimeter of the graveyard and my neighborhood, I decided to walk through the graveyard and search for him in there. So, and I strolled, calling, "Billy," over and over again. As I got deeper into the cemetery, I came across a car. It seemed to be some old man who was dropping off flowers for someone. I just kept walking and calling out for my missing cat. As I got closer to the man, I noticed he was staring at me and backing away. I found his behavior kind of strange, but being sick, exhausted, and solely focused on finding my cat, I ignored it and just kept walking. As soon as I was past him though, I heard a car door slam, and by the time I turned around to see if he was okay, he was speeding out of the cemetery. I finished my walk, went home, and fell asleep. It was only upon waking up that I realized how creepy that must have been for the old man. He was dropping off flowers in a secluded graveyard in the middle of the afternoon, when some girl, drenched in sweat and with matted hair, and blood dripping out of her nose, starts coming towards him, yelling, "Billy! Come on, Billy!" over and over again, with a voice so deep she sounds like a demon. So, the man I creeped out in the graveyard today, let's meet sometime so I can try to explain what just happened. I'll start with a little background on me so you can understand the type of person I am. I didn't have a traumatic childhood. I was never abused, neglected, or any of the stereotypical serial killer stuff. In fact, it was quite the opposite. If anything, my family gave me too much and was overly protective. I think this is actually what led to my issues. I was never allowed to go to other kids' houses unless my mother had met their parents first, which led to me being left out of things a lot. I was not allowed to watch a lot of the movies that other kids my age were always talking about. For example, Jurassic Park was huge with my classmates when I was around 10, but I never got to watch it. I believe I was 16 or 17 by the time I actually saw the movie for the first time. This kind of thing led to me being further out of the loop. Couple that with the fact that my grandma would buy me pretty much anything I even hinted that I wanted, which led to a lot of jealousy from the other kids. And I was more or less the bullied loner all through school. I never really learned how to relate to other people, and I'm socially awkward and have anxiety issues to this day anytime I have to deal with anyone I don't know well. As far as looks go, I know people tend to expect creepers to be overnight balding guys with thick glasses and bad skin. You know, the typical 40-year-old basement dweller. I'm sorry to disappoint, but I've always been told I'm a decently attractive guy. I'm at worst average looking. Even in high school when I was an outcast, I overheard a girl talking about me once and saying something along the lines of, "Yeah, he'd be hot if he wasn't so fucking weird." So you really can't judge a book by its cover. Relationships have always been a huge struggle for me for two main reasons. One, I struggle to even approach someone I don't know. let alone hold a conversation, figure out if they're interested, and ask them out. Most of the girlfriends I've had usually pursued me and initiated the relationship. The second reason is that being around other people is utterly draining for me. It takes an extreme effort for me to try to appear normal around others. I'm constantly worried about whether I'm doing or saying the right things. I go through conversations in my head before I actually speak to make sure it won't be misunderstood. I second guess everything and sit there analyzing every tiny detail of their reactions to me to see if I'm coming off as I mean to. The effort is utterly exhausting, and most of the time I'd rather just be alone. However, I am still a human being, and I still have a need for attention and affection. The problem is, I'm like a dog chasing a car. I don't know what to do with it when I finally get it, and it usually ends in pain. Anyway, on to the actual story here. I was in my early 20s, just after college. The local rock radio station I listened to got a female DJ who was on during the time I was usually listening to the radio. She seemed cool, played a lot of stuff I liked, and was fun to listen to, so I would tune in pretty much every night. She would occasionally talk a little bit about her personal interest, and I shared most of them. She liked video games, comic books, rock music obviously, and other somewhat nerdy things, especially for a girl. I was eventually convinced that we had so much in common that she was the perfect girl for me. I followed her on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, pretty much every social media page she had, even tracking down her personal Facebook, and not just the public one she advertised on the radio. I talked to her through social media whenever I could think of something to say, which most of the time just ended up being song requests. But she was always friendly, and even gave me a shout out on air one night. I know I'm already sounding creepy, but I swear my intentions were 100% innocent at this point. I really just liked this girl a lot, and wanted to get to know her, but I had no idea how to go about it. I started going to every concert the radio station sponsored, which in our smaller town were not very big or very often. We don't have any kind of arena or anything, so they were all at bars with a few hundred people at most. We got some nationally known bands, but nobody major. They were mostly up-and-coming bands, or bands who were past their prime. The biggest thing they had was in a field behind a bar, with a couple thousand in attendance. Anyway, she was always there of course, since she worked for the station, and because the concerts were so small, I would always see her. I could never work up the guts to go talk to her, because at this point, I had put her on this pedestal in my mind, and I just couldn't talk to her unless I was sure I would say the right things. I couldn't have her first impressions of me being anything less than perfect. So most of the time, I just got drunk and talked to whoever was near me instead. After a while of this, I ran into a guy I worked with at one concert. I was already pretty drunk at this point, so I ended up telling him that I liked this girl, but I was too afraid to talk to her. His response was to drag my drunken self up to her and strike up a conversation. When I'm drunk, I'm actually pretty outgoing, so surprisingly, things went well, and I left very excited about everything. I sent her a message on Facebook a couple days later, and she remembered me, which was really encouraging, and I ended up asking her if she'd like to hang out sometime. She agreed, and I nearly broke my desk, I was so excited. Since she worked nights on the radio, as well as a second job, apparently 4 hours a night on a small town radio station doesn't pay the bills. I ended up meeting her for lunch at the mall on her break. Lunch didn't go so well. My sober self clearly isn't as charming as my drunken self, and things were rather quiet and awkward. In desperation, I started talking about all the things we had in common, and eventually, I got really desperate and told her I thought I might be falling for her. In hindsight, probably not the best thing to say to a girl who just met you, and she was understandably creeped out. She politely excused herself to go back to work, and I sat there, wanting to smash my head on the table. I knew I had blown my chances with her. Instead of admitting defeat though, I just had to keep trying. I messaged her on Facebook about 1,000 times over the next couple of weeks, apologizing for coming on too strong and trying to get another shot. She responded a few times and was polite, but a lot less friendly than before. Eventually she blocked me, and looking back, I can't say I blame her. At the time though, I was distraught. Then my sadness turned to anger. At first I was angry at myself more than anything, but then I started thinking things like, I was never anything but nice to her. Why can't she just get to know me? I decided I needed to talk to her in person again, but she was clearly not going to meet me at this point, so I would hang around her store in the mall, but I always seemed to miss her. After thinking about it today, I suspect they probably sent her to the back to hide when they saw me coming, but at the time, I just thought she must work a different schedule every day. Finally, I waited for her after work at the radio station. This was my worst idea yet. As I mentioned, she was on the air at night, so it was after midnight when she came outside and got in her car to go home. I followed her. Even at the time, I realized I was being creepy, but I was so desperate to be with this girl that I didn't care. I mean, this sort of thing happens all the time in the movies, and the girls eventually end up with the guy, and they have this crazy romantic story to tell, right? Real life is not like the movies. She apparently called the cops on the way back to her place, because they pulled in right behind us and dragged me out of the car. I was arrested and ended up on probation with a restraining order. I never had any intentions of hurting her, but I understand she had no way of knowing that at the time, other than a handwritten apology letter, which was read and delivered to her by a police officer. I've had no further contact with her. She left the radio station and moved to another city shortly after. I've been through court-ordered therapy, and some of my issues have gotten better. I actually have a girlfriend now, and a pretty healthy relationship. Although I still suffer from anxiety and depression, I'm managing it and living a reasonably happy life now. I haven't creeped on anyone since. This happened a few years ago, back when I was 17. It was winter, so it was getting dark fairly early, and an event was happening at my girlfriend's school. Throughout the event, live music was performed by students. My girlfriend was singing as a part of a small band, and I was going to see her perform. The thing is, I live along an awkward bus route that doesn't link up with the village in which the school is located, meaning I have a 20-minute bus ride and around a 15-minute walk across some fields to get to the school. So I set out with plenty of time for the bus ride, and enough time for my short walk. I got on the bus and sat on the back seat, as I usually do when it's free. It's already dark outside at this point, and just my luck, partway through the bus journey, traffic. There had been an accident some ways up the road, which caused us to be delayed for quite a while. Meaning that when I got off the bus, I was going to have to either run or be late for the event. So, the bus finally gets to its stop. Around 4 other people get off the bus before me. The first, a girl roughly around my age, possibly a year or two younger, hard to tell. She gets off the bus and jogs along the road and out of sight. The other passengers, mostly elderly, take their time to get off the bus next. I thank the driver, hop off the bus, and quickly pull out my phone to check the time, and text my girlfriend, telling her that I was delayed. So, it's time to go. Don't want to be late after all. I run down the road and turn off through the gate into the first field and continue running. I thought, as once again, I see the girl from the bus up ahead of me in the middle of the field. She must have got tired and started walking. I didn't think much of it and planned to run past her. I continued until I saw her stumble and pause for a moment. She must have heard my footsteps. She turned her head and caught sight of me, immediately snapping forwards again to keep walking. I sensed she felt nervous, so I stopped running and began to walk, which may sound more suspicious than I intended it to be, but I wasn't about to charge headfirst towards a young, nervous girl in the middle of a field in the dark. Now that, I feel, would have probably got me into some trouble. However, I didn't want to be late. I knew my girlfriend would be one of the first performances. She'd kill me if I missed it, but I couldn't run. So I found a mid-ground and walked quickly. After a couple of minutes, I gained up on the girl. She noticed and sped up too. For brother's sake, can't you just hang to the side and let me go past you? I thought to myself. I sped up slightly. She did the same. I saw her clutching at her phone, probably resting her finger on the dial button for emergency services. I suddenly realized that she may actually be heading to the same event that I was. I opened my mouth to speak, only to clamp it shut immediately. She was nervous, and I'm socially awkward. Chances are, I'd just make her think she was being stalked or something. I knew better than to spit out creepy lines about knowing where she was headed to. After all, I wasn't even a student at the school. She couldn't have recognized me if she tried. We began a long and awkward game of possibly terrified girl walks quickly away from impatient yet innocent and nice guy with no harmful intent. I just felt awful, but I couldn't slow down. I needed to be at that event on time. Eventually, we got out of the fields and back onto a street-lit road. She followed the road around, presumably to stay within the streetlights. I immediately darted into an alleyway, shortcut towards the school, attempting to make up for lost time, and got to the school just as the crowd filtered into the event hall. Once the event was over, we all went out into the car park, and there was the girl, standing among a group of friends, likely having warned them of the field creeper who chased her down for 15 minutes. She noticed me. Her face went blank, slightly pale. I held my girlfriend's hand and gave the girl a sheepish smile and a shrug. She reciprocated with the kind of expression that says, "You have got to be fucking kidding me," as she realized all I was trying to do was get here quickly. I didn't start a conversation and just left. I'm a 28-year-old male living in the Deep South. I am now a functional, medicated, and therapy-attending paranoid schizophrenic. However, I wasn't always this way, and this story comes from a time before I ever even knew what was wrong. It was about April 2007 when this happened. I had just come out of a painful divorce, and she had taken all of my friends away from me in the process. I was obviously trying to reach out to anyone I could, but I had severe codependency issues that I didn't know how to address. Anyway, I found myself wandering the game section of my local Walmart, as I am still a gamer at heart and had to see what was available. Things were going alright, and I seemed to be in control of myself. Then he appeared. This poor, unsuspecting soul started talking to me about World of Warcraft, which I happened to play. I perked up at this point, thinking I could make a friend. A new friend that hadn't been taken from me. We made casual jokes and talked about the new expansion. I can't remember if it had just came out or if it was soon to come. At this point, his mother, he was probably about 18 to 20, judging by his appearance, came by and took him to another aisle. He didn't say goodbye, he just walked off. And like that, our conversation was through. Well, in my mind, we had made a connection. We had bonded. In my sick, twisted state, I thought he would appreciate it if we hung out for a while. So I followed him. I made a point to casually stroll down the aisles that he happened to visit and strike up conversations with him about different things. Jokes. I can't remember. I could tell he was getting creeped out by the third time I had done this. He started getting this deer in the headlights look every time he saw me, and it was starting to become a horror story, though in my eyes, it was perfectly natural. At some point, however, his fight or flight must have kicked in, because when I appeared, as soon as I opened my mouth to speak, he screamed, "Leave me alone!" and stormed off, dragging his mother as quickly as he possibly could. This was a wake-up call for me, that I was being severely creepy, and also a stalker. I realized that this could very well be the behavior that caused my divorce in the first place. I checked myself into a mental institution soon after. I am now significantly better, and my relationships with people have improved greatly. I now have good friends and a loving fiancé. Not all creepers mean to be creepy. Some of us just need the proper psychiatric help. On behalf of all the unknowing and good-intentioned creepers out there, I humbly and sincerely apologize for our behavior. It doesn't make it forgivable, but I hope it does give some context as to what goes on in the mind of a creeper. Thank you for your time.